As you walk through life, do you ever notice changes? Do you ever sit down and think about people, events that shifted your path? See, in this age of information we live in, we have unlimited potential to connect with people. But are we consciously aware of those connections? Personally, I mentally analyze this every day, taking note of people and places that move my environment. I've noticed that every time I progress, it's been the direct result of my link to people around me. With that being said, I want to share this journey. This is my story through your story. I'm Michael Mims, and you're watching Conscious Connection.
So I grew up in Crystal Lake, Illinois. First 5 years in Huntley, which is right next door, and then moved to Crystal Lake and spent the rest of my younger years there. Oldest of 6 kids. Mm-hmm. My dad was a pharmacist and my mom a stay-at-home mom. There were 6 of us within 7 years, so we were in pretty tight quarters. So my brothers and I shared a bedroom, so 4 guys in one room and 2 sisters in another. But we would be probably defined nowadays as lower middle class, but didn't know any different. We seemed to have all that we needed to have a good education and a loving family, so it was good.
So when you kind of define yourself as a lower middle class, would you say that kind of drove maybe your hunger to be more successful and help provide for your family or maybe your future family at all?
I don't think so. I don't think it ever came up or really even crossed my mind. I do know that there were, because we lived in a relatively small house but in a very nice area, I wasn't too crazy about having people over to the house, you know, just because of how it might be portrayed and all that, which is pretty shallow when I look back at that. And at the same time, I was also a pretty big introvert. So for me, getting by day to day and year to year was kind of the thing. I wasn't really thinking about future.
That's pretty cool. So after that, did you go to high school out there in Illinois too, I'm assuming?
Yeah, so I went to Marion Central, which is a Catholic high school in Woodstock. So it was the only Catholic high school in the county. And so went to Marion, had a good experience there, played baseball, did track, had a good education, but again was pretty close to the vest. Had a couple close friends, but otherwise liked to be kind of a homebody.
That's cool. And then how did you come to choose Loras?
I had applied to 5 different colleges, Bradley, Drake, Carroll, St. John's, and Loras. And went and had good visits at all of them, but it was clear to me that I preferred a smaller school. And with Loras being Catholic and liberal arts and about a little less than 3 hours away, it seemed to be the right fit. A little easier to get access to home and simultaneously being somewhat like the high school that I went to. So for me it was a safe choice.
How far away was it from home?
Just under 3 hours.
3 hours, yeah. It's not bad. Just across the river too. Did you ever take any trips up to Wisconsin while you were in college?
I did, not too many. I probably took more trips to Wisconsin when I was in high school than I did when I was here at Loras.
So talk about your college experience too. What things do you see kind of similar to now that still kind of hold on as tradition and stuff like that?
Well, it was interesting because when I came to Loras, the enrollment was booming and we didn't have as big a campus as we do now or have as many buildings. And so 85 of us guys lived at Clark our first year. So that was kind of a unique situation. So I can't say that I really got into the Loras experience that first year. But when I came back from my sophomore year, it was like a transformative time. I really made a lot of friends, was really starting to enjoy classes, and wound up getting very, very involved with things that range from student government, that was very common to today, to, in those days it was called Intercultural Club, which is more like our Intercultural Programs Office now. Very active in intramurals and all of that, but really wound up having a great experience. And during the academic time, I moved from being an English major to an accounting major to a finance major.
Wow.
And look back and I'm grateful for the choice I made, but also great for the experience I had in the other 2 programs as well.
And it was liberal arts back in the day too, right?
Yep, we had, in those days, the gen ed curriculum was much bigger, so I think we had about 60 credits to take in gen ed, whereas nowadays students have around 33 to 36 credits. In those days, we were required year-long writing, semester of speech, a semester of logic. So lots of those requirements have been gone, but the theory is still all the same, you know. Being able to write, critically think, and speak publicly was important back in the day, and it's still important now.
All right, so fast forward to your graduation. What were you thinking right away after you graduated?
When I graduated, I was maybe a little too self-confident, and I thought, you know, I've been so involved at Loras, it's time. I'm going to go back to Chicago. I'm going to live with my parents. I'm going to hang out with my friends for a month or so, and then I'll start looking for a job. And what I was thinking is, you know, it'd be great to be a banker in downtown Chicago, and that'd be the life to lead. Well, I wasn't at home very long before I thought, and my parents thought, this isn't going to work really well. So I started looking for a job, wound up applying for a position at University of Wisconsin-Platteville in their business office. And that day in July, I came down to Loras just to say hi to a few folks. And when I was leaving campus, a longtime professor came to me and said, what are you doing? I told him. And he said, you know, there's an admissions job open at Loras. Why don't you apply for it? So
wow.
I never planned on it. I went in and I saw the director. He said he had a boatload of applications. He wasn't happy with any of them. He remembered me as a student. He said, if you want the job, it's yours. You just have to come back and meet the president in 2 days. I met with the president. It wasn't even an interview. He said, here's your contract, $10,250 and a used car, and I thought I died and went to heaven.
That's awesome. That's a cool story. So right after you got the job, did you think you're going to stay there for a long time, or do you think it was kind of a transitional period for you?
Yeah, I think it was transitional. I thought, you know, this is so cool that I get to be back at my alma mater. I still have a lot of, you know, friends who are students here. I know lots of the professors and staff, but I'll do this for 2 or 3 years, and then I'll head back to Chicago, and I'll be that banker that I always wanted to be,
yeah.
You know, after graduation. But obviously, things changed.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's been, is it going on 37 years, 36 and a half right now?
Don't date me that much, Michael. I'll finish my 35th year working this year at Loras.
Okay.
Yeah.
Almost.
Almost.
Close,
that's
close,
right.
close.
Yep.
All right. So, I guess going throughout your career, you started at an admissions rep, and then what'd you go on to do after that?
So I had planned to resign at the end of my 3rd year as an admissions rep, and Kevin White, who's the athletic director at Duke right now, and was former AD at Notre Dame and former AD here, he approached me and said, let's go out for a beer. I'd like to just talk to you. So we went out for a beer, had a good conversation, and the next morning he said, you know, I'm posting a position tomorrow. I'd really like you to apply for it. It was a director of annual giving. I applied for the position. I wound up not getting it. So I thought, okay, I'll just go to Chicago. He said, no. He said, I'm creating a position for you. It's going to be called Director of Special Projects. And so I did that for a year. And when I was finished with that, he wound up leaving for the University of Maine as athletics director. And so he invited me to come out and interview for a campaign fundraising position at Maine. I interviewed, he offered me the job, and I was grateful, but then the president at Loras said, really don't want you to leave. There's an alumni director position here at the college, and we'd love for you to be the new director. So I took that.
That's awesome. And what did that all entail?
Mostly traveling all across the country, meeting up with alums, mostly in the form of events that we had, and trying to take what was a small number of alumni chapters in the country and build them to a lot more. So I think at the time that I came into the position, there were maybe 6 alumni chapters, and by the time I finished my 4 years, I think we had 37 or 38.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, it was a good experience.
Yeah, that's a lot. So after that, you fast forward to now, president of the college. Actually, that was 2004?
2004 is when I became president, and 1992 is when I finished being alumni director. So I served as vice president for advancement and senior vice president in those in-between years.
What were the positions in between those years?
Vice president for advancement, so that would have been overseeing alumni relations, marketing, and fundraising.
Okay.
And then I was elevated to senior vice president, which oversaw all those areas, but then added athletics, enrollment management, and marketing.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot of positions in between. And it took you, what was it? That was 20 years?
So in 20 years, I served in all those positions, had all those experiences, and then was named president in February 2004, and I took over in June of 2004.
Okay, so talk about how that 20-year span really helped you with the experience and all that to kind of be able to sit in that chair as president and run a whole institution.
Well, I think the great thing about those 20 years happened to be that I got exposed to virtually every area on the campus except for teaching, which I'm sure the faculty are very happy about. So in addition to getting to know all those areas, I was also learning all the different important roles that you have to have. You've got to have legal acumen, you've got to have writing acumen, you've got to have public speaking acumen. So I was able to have experiences to build capacity in those areas. At the same time, all of the alumni and friends of the college and the local community I was meeting up with, I was getting to know, I was serving on boards with, I was entertaining them back on campus, I was entertaining them as I traveled across the country. So I was getting to build relationships that were ultimately going to be helpful in the position that I'm now serving. The other thing that was happening is that I got to get to know students and faculty and staff in such a great way that you started to understand better what were the needs, who were the people who were really making a difference, what sorts of resources might I be able to provide, how could I assist them in their jobs. So those 20 years gave me a range of experiences that I can't imagine doing this job without having had.
Wow. And it's kind of ironic because I feel our generation really wants things now, the instant gratification, that kind of theory, but you really realize how hard you have to work just to get to that point,
right?
To get to where you want to be. And even though it was kind of a path where it kind of fell upon you at the beginning, but then you realized I can really do something at the college, which is awesome.
Yeah, I think that there were a lot of lessons I learned in those years, but I think the 2 or 3 takeaways for me were, one is, as much as I appreciated coming into any one of those positions and somebody else or some group of people having trust in me being able to do it, when you enter into that position and you begin doing those responsibilities, you quickly find out how much you don't know. So it's a humbling experience, but it's also another reminder that, everybody wants to climb the proverbial ladder, but you don't want to skip too many rungs. So it's really important to learn all the lessons you need to do whatever job promotion you're getting an opportunity to pursue. You want to do that well, otherwise there will be no other job opportunity or career builder. I think the second thing is that more than I ever realized, I didn't apply for one of these positions except presidency. That it does teach you that if you put your nose down, you work hard, and you produce good work, and you treat people well and build good relationships, there are a lot of good people watching out after you, and that they ultimately will find a way to take care of you. And so I was really fortunate that way. And I think the third big lesson that I learned in all of this was that you encounter a lot of new experiences, and as much as you have a new experience, that new experience or that new challenge or that new conflict is going to keep repeating itself over and over and over. And even as you've gone through it once, you need to know the next time you experience, there will always be something slightly different about it, either with a different type of person you're dealing with, it's a different type of issue, it's a more volatile issue. So while it's helpful to have that previous experience, you never ultimately go through the same thing, and you always have to bring a different skill set to how you resolve it.
Yeah, that's a very good way to put it. When you sit in the presidential chair the first year, was there people that you looked to, like mentors and friends, colleagues, even students that you maybe learned from and kind of help you get the reins for what you're doing?
Yes, I think I was blessed in that there were an awful lot of student, staff, faculty, alumni who wanted me not only in the position, but they wanted me to succeed in the position. And so I really relied on them. I would go to them, whether it was a faculty member or a student, and say, you know, what can I do to make Loras better? What sort of things can I do to make your experience better? All of that was helpful. And then at the same time, there were board members and alumni that were able to say, hey, I know what it's like to be your age entering into this position. I can give you some advice. Here are 2 or 3 tidbits that I found really helpful, or here are 2 or 3 things that you might want to avoid. And then in a short period of time, I also got to know other college presidents, some of whom were Loras affiliated, others of whom weren't. They were able to tell me, here's what it's like to sit in the chair, and same thing. Here are some things you might want to do, but here are some things you might want to avoid. Mm-hmm. So I was very fortunate.
Yeah, sure. And I guess what I've experienced at Loras, just kind of what you're talking about, same thing, where it's really well connected and it's very inclusive. Mm-hmm. And can you talk about how do you think that beginning stages of your career where you are really connecting straight to the students, and now where you're kind of doing the same thing in a presidential position, can you tell how those kind of correlated and how that impacted you to do what you're doing now?
Yeah, I'm a big believer that, you know, nobody stands on third base without hitting the triple. Mm-hmm. So you've got to work hard, you've got to build your skill set, but you also have to remember that when you land on third, or when you cross home base, whatever the analogy is, to think that it all happened as a byproduct of you, or that it happened in the last year, isn't true. So I remember what it was like to be an introvert and how scary life was. I remember what it was like to be an admissions rep and feel like I didn't have a voice. I remember what it was like to be a student and feel as if I didn't have a voice. Mm-hmm. So I also remember working in a factory and being made fun of for either being Catholic or being at a college or something like that. And I vowed that I was never going to intentionally allow people to be in those positions. So while I have to make hard decisions and I sometimes have to lay down the law and all that sort of thing, more than anything, I really try and conduct myself in a way that reminds myself that when you're a student, you have to remember that these are young people going through this, or that if you're a faculty member, you have to understand there's certain complexities that I sometimes may lose sight of. Or if you're a staff member, sometimes you don't feel as if you can make your opinion known without having fear for retribution. Mm-hmm. So I really do try and do those daily reminders so that even though I'm much older now than students, I really do try and interact with students so that they feel valued and that they feel appreciated and that they feel as if they have a voice, and try and do that with staff and faculty. Unfortunately, I'm human, so it doesn't always work out that way, but that's the intent.
Yeah, and it shows. A lot of the students, in my experience, I think the first time I ever met you, we had a full conversation, and I was with a teammate at the time, and I literally had no clue that you were president.
It's like, who is this guy,
right?
I
was like, I had a full conversation. He walked away. I was like, do you know who that is? He's like the president of the college. I was like, what? Are you serious?
I prefer it that way.
Yeah, which
keep
is
the
awesome.
title out of the way.
A lot of presidents of institutions and colleges don't do it the same. Like, you are very active on Twitter, reaching out to students, replying to students and stuff like that. Like, it helps a lot, especially from our perspective, because that's our world right now.
Right.
Like that's our communication. That's how we sometimes get out our feelings, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And it seems like you're always there to respond.
Mostly, in a positive way.
Yeah, right, exactly. Right. So that's awesome. And so talking a little bit more about the college, what do you think Loras kind of has to offer in differentiation from another school, maybe?
Well, I think it first starts with we've got really talented faculty and staff who, I would say almost to a person, really want to see every student succeed. Mm. And I think in a little way they're like parents. You know how we all have parents and guardians who we love and we're grateful to for the most part, but they drive us crazy too. You know, they challenge us, they hold us accountable and all of that. So I think our faculty and staff do a really great job of challenging students, holding students accountable, while simultaneously giving them a really good experience inside and outside the classroom. Mm. I think the second thing is that same faculty and staff really do a good job of getting to know students, and I think working with students so that they fully understand the potential that they have. Because oftentimes when you're 18, 19, 20, you don't see in yourself what other people see in you. And so it's nice to have people who are looking at you in a way that you say, oh, I didn't know that people thought I was good at writing, or I didn't know somebody thought that I was a good leader. When you have people like that in a place like this, that's what inspires, you know, our graduates to land in really great professions and great graduate school opportunities, etc. I think the other big thing here is that I do think from an early on stage, we have students that come in here, all different points of life, not sure necessarily where they want to go. Some have a good, clear direction, but they really do commit themselves to putting themselves into the Loras experience in a full-fledged way. Some of that is fun, some of that is by making mistakes, but lots of it is really by having a variety of opportunities pursued so that you land up developing better capacity. And then in the end, while there are certainly some cliques here, and there's certainly, you know, some groups liking to do this more than other groups liking to do something else, that do Hawks support and do Hawks mentality really does resonate in a significant way. And so I always tell people, I think the differentiator for a place like Loras is not only quality education, quality relationships, quality mentors, etc., but at the end of the day, when you want access to a job or an internship or a study away experience or to a graduate school opportunity, there are faculty and staff that can connect you almost directly with exactly what you want. But there's also a large number of alumni who are willing to say, yeah, I'm going to give this young person a chance and all that sort of thing. And I think that network and that kind of mentoring, I think while it exists at other places, I think it's one of the great defining charisms of Loras.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I mean, we have people from top companies coming back and talking to each major, which is crazy. And another thing today that happened from an alumni. Well, it wasn't an alumni. It was actually somebody just like the college, I guess.
That's exactly right. Giving the gift to the college.
Yeah,
that's exactly right.
That was awesome. That's an exclusive, by the way. But yeah.
Good job, Michael.
Yeah. All right. So, just talking about alumni again, though. Like, what do you think drives them to come back? What is that network process that you've kind of helped instill in the college throughout the years that you've been president? How have you made that a trend, coming back to college, coming back to Loras, visiting, or kind of contributing your time, money, or in any other way, really?
Well, it's hard for me to talk about any of Loras' success as it relates to me, because I think that, one, I was blessed to inherit a place that already had it in its bones. Okay. And we have a strong alumni base, great faculty, staff, great students for as long as I've been here. So whatever's happened is really more just me trying to pull out of students, pull out of faculty, staff, and alumni the proverbial Midwest nice. You know, none of us want to brag, and all of us want to be humble. All that's great, but there's nothing in the gospel and there's nothing in life that doesn't say that you don't get to brag about your institution, about your fellow person, about your favorite teacher. We should all be doing that, because there's an awful lot to be proud of. So I think that's one of the things that's happened, is that the inordinate success we're having, my role is just to remind students, faculty, and staff that they've been part of that. And as an alum, they need to understand your degree just got more valuable because of that. And so my way of communicating with alumni is almost always to say that, you know, as you share your life story, very little that you're sharing doesn't revert right back to Loras. So while you may not be able to make $1 million gift, and you may not be able to send us 5 students, everybody can brag openly about the college. Everybody can come back and participate in the life of the college, whether it's as a speaker or a participant in homecoming. Everybody can access a student to an internship, a job opportunity, or an introduction into a new city. You know, you're talking about going to Arizona and California. We have alums that if they knew you were coming, they'd be happy to show you the town or get you out to a restaurant and all those sorts of things. I just think that that's a really important part of what Loras alums need to do, because none of us landed out in life as well as we did were it not for people trying to help you back at the college in the same way. So we have the same obligation to give back to students in that same way. So it's encouragement that I do.
I like that. So Loras also has a big faith aspect.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of tell me how faith has helped you in your life as well as maybe helped the college grow.
I think the faith part is a differentiator as well, as much as sharing it. And it is, I'm always cognizant of the fact we've got 18 to 22-year-olds. So it's an important time in your lives because you're learning, you're growing, you have independence and autonomy now where you're going to make mistakes, and guys like me are going to say, I'm going to support you in those mistakes, we're going to grow in those mistakes, but the boundaries of the mistakes are in here. You can't go too far this way or too far that way.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, the extent to which I can live an honorable life, model integrity, demonstrate, not by wearing it on my sleeve, but just by the way in which hopefully I conduct myself professionally and personally, that faith is an important thing. So I pray every day. Does everybody see me pray every day? No. Do I do little things like get back from a trip to see alumni and a car ride? Thank God, privately right then, absolutely. I want to model that for students because I think at the end of the day, that's what gives you balance. It's one of the inner cores. So I always tell people that I'm a big believer in the living Trinity, and that's faith, family, and friends. So we all need that three-legged stool. You know, you need family, even if it's one sibling that your go-to, and we all need friends, even if it's that one go-to friend that you can tell anything to and they're always going to support you. Mm-hmm. But you're always going to need to rely on God because not always will family and friends be there, so you need that third stool. But to prescribe for people how they should develop that relationship with God and how they should go about their faith, that takes different imaginations, and how it is for a guy in the 50s versus for somebody in their youthful 20s, it all plays out. But I just never want students to leave here forgetting that faith is an important part of what their future, and in many ways what it is that got them here, no matter how they practiced or didn't during their time here. For Loras, it's just like we want you all to write well, but you may not be an A+ writer but if you know it's important, you're going to work on it, so maybe by age 30 you're going to be that much better writer. It's the same thing with faith. You may not have invested in your faith in the way in which you could or should, but I want Loras to remind our students that if you didn't, it's not too late, and at some point later in life it's going to be really important, so don't forget about that. If we don't give those messages, then we've failed our students.
Right. And I feel like reverting back to our generation too, there was even a conversation on Twitter the other day, I just saw on my timeline, talking about how we don't have enough faith or even belief in ourselves, but it's because we don't believe in something greater than ourselves. So it's hard to even know how to go about certain situations, stuff like that.
That's exactly right. I'm a big believer in little things. You may just laugh at me and then shut off the camera, but you know, to your point about you don't understand your impact, you know, you're a bright student, you've already got a job lined up after graduation, you've been a leader in lots of ways, you've started your own entity outside of campus, you worked hard, you suffered through adversity here. There have been moments you know about, but there's been more moments you don't know about where you've been that inspiration. When that happens, I really think that's a sign that God or Christ or the Holy Spirit is working through individuals so that they can show that even in adversity or even in success, while you benefit from it in some ways, there's somebody else benefiting from it. That's not an accident, you know. That's something, to your point about being a greater power than in ourselves.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
It's all right. It's truth.
And as far as liberal arts goes, what do you think really helps a student rather than going to somewhere who doesn't have that in their curriculum? How do you think experiencing that and getting to learn through that system helps them?
So using a practical example, nowadays everybody's talking about, well, you need a trade, you need a credential, or you need to be proficient in a certain discipline. So whether it's engineering or medicine or truck driving, it's all the same. Just go after that and you don't need anything else. My fundamental problem with that concept is not that you shouldn't be really knowledgeable about all things engineering if you're going to be an engineer. You shouldn't be very proficient about all things medical if you're going to be a doctor. But how are you going to do your trade well if you can't communicate? How are you going to do your trade well if you haven't been in situations where you have to relate with other individuals as colleagues, as superiors, or as individuals to whom you're serving? How are you going to navigate a challenging situation without having been in situations where you have to resolve conflict or think critically? Or how is it that you're going to be able to take a tough concept in engineering and explain it to the individual you want to buy your product or come and be a client of your company if you can't speak and navigate that conversation well? That, for me, is what the power of a liberal arts education is, and the differentiator, again, for a place like Loras. Now, given where we're at today, if I could ban a term in the entire country right now, it would be liberal arts, because it's so misunderstood, and people are so ignorant about liberal arts, they immediately think, oh, I'm not a liberal, I'm a conservative, and all that. But, or they'll say, what do liberal arts have to do with getting a job and all that sort of thing? For me, I wish we would talk more about how whatever it is we want to pursue in life, you need to know that nothing happens in isolation. So if I'm going to be an attorney, I might know the law, but to the extent I know history, to the extent I can write well, to the extent that I can be a good public speaker, to the extent that I was involved in mock trial, to the extent that I was on a basketball team and had to build chemistry on a team and all that, just like being an attorney and building chemistry among your partners, those experiences ultimately will make you a great lawyer, not just a trade lawyer. Same thing with doctor and engineering and whatever else you do. That's what a liberal arts education is to do, is that when you learn economics, you can't learn economics in isolation. You need to incorporate religion and history. And you can't learn about business without being able to talk about developing relationships and thinking critically, etc. So that's why I think that we in higher education have to do a better job of telling a society that's saying, hey, you only need the trades. We need to say something different and do it better.
Yeah, which kind of brings up my next point, because there's a lot of people, especially on social media, that, it's not even about liberal arts, but just saying college alone, like, they're saying, I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to run my own business. I don't need college. I can just do this off of my own, which there's success stories doing that. But what do you think kind of college plays a role in that aspect, where people say, I want to do this, I'm going to learn about this trade, do it, and I'll be done?
Right. Everybody can, especially in the climate of social media, you see that one headline story and say, see, I can do that.
Right.
So Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook, right? The famous obvious one. But it's a little bit like being a great athlete. I so admire you and your athletic career, but what people don't understand, the likelihood of an 8th grader being a high school varsity athlete is less than 10%. The likelihood of high school varsity athlete being a college athlete is less than 1%. And the likelihood of being a pro athlete versus college is, the eye of the needle sort of thing. I use that analogy because I think it's similar about becoming an entrepreneur or a really successful person without having had access to college. That I think it's much more difficult. So while I might have a concept or an idea about building a business, where are you going to get the legal expertise? Where are you going to get the acumen for developing a business plan? Where are you going to go to begin with relationships you need to get off the ground? It's nice when you have a few college classmates that might come to your restaurant, right? Or it would be nice if you actually had a few people among an alumni base that could help you introduce your product into Seattle or wherever it is that you might want to pursue or build your capacity. I think that college formation, for all those reasons, important, but also the centeredness about just knowing the key disciplines and the framework from which to pursue things. But I also think the soft skill part of life is really important. So having roommates, sometimes it's a great experience, sometimes it's not, but it's an important experience to have.
Right.
Being on a team. Sometimes it goes great, sometimes it doesn't go great, but it's an important concept. And there are very few alums I talk to in life that reflecting on their experience at Loras, while always positive, it's more positive as the years go by because they quickly learn that was a headache at age 18 was really the motivational component of how successful they are now at age 30.
Right.
And that's what I think college does for a student, is a wide variety of experiences so you can hone skills, develop a framework, but then more importantly, be an entrepreneur, but maybe in a more narrow and likely way that you're going to succeed, as opposed to just a shotgun and random approach.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I guess you touched on it too, but it's really not about. It is about helping you get a job and kind of boost your career, but also there's more qualifications that go into it, as far as, just like you said, soft skills, relationships, networks, and stuff like that. So yeah, that's a great explanation of why you should go to college. And what do you think your career and education kind of has helped you throughout life and different aspects of your life?
Well, I think there's a lot. I mean, one is, it sounds trite to say, but no matter what position I've been in at Loras, there's never a day where when I go home, I don't feel as if I've made a difference in a positive way. Now, that doesn't mean that I go home every night and say, oh gosh, I'm so happy that there's no challenges, because there's always a challenge and all that. But you really do find that there's an opportunity to make a difference to the extent that you put yourself out there. I think the other thing is that I've learned so much and come to better understand privilege in a way that I probably didn't understand. But when I come in contact with so many great students like yourself, about, like when you suffered through your injuries, I mean, my heart went out for you. So whatever challenge I might have been having that day, I was like, Michael's putting up with this and going through something that he loves and maybe having to give that up at some point. That's pretty impressive. It humbles you when you're in education. You quickly find out that there's a lot of individuals who have more challenging situations than I might find myself in. You also find yourself, like when I think back to growing up my own self, well, I never considered ourselves rich in any mean. When I come in contact with more individuals now, among our alumni base or among our student base, and I find out, I grew up in a pretty rich environment. I've known students who have been in and out of homelessness. I've known students who don't necessarily know who their father was. I've known students who have really had to struggle just from an academic standpoint of, how do I give up 40 hours of work in a week, because without it I'm not going to be able to afford my college. But simultaneously, how am I going to carry a credit load of 15, right? That's the power of education, as you come in contact with so many diverse individuals, varied experiences, varied backgrounds, but you know that the role you play as a part of this larger institution can really make a difference of raising lives up and building lives, and the impact that those lives will have to a greater capacity that we'll never know. So
yeah, that's powerful.
It has been for me.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's about all I have, though. So
not a problem.
I really
Mike.
appreciate you.
Not a problem. Appreciate
Talking
you,
with
Michael.
me, yeah.
Proud of you and all your success, and can't wait for you to be one of those great, successful alums.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
No problem.
Yeah. All right.
Lights off.